Welcome to another episode of the Solopreneur Survival Club. Today we are going to talk about money. Well, we always talk about money, but today we're going to talk about money again. In particular, we're going to talk about how to manage your money with your bank accounts. When I was first starting out on my own in university, I was living on my own in a different city, didn't have my parents here or anything of the sort. I, of course, had a job and whatnot to get by. I lived paycheck to paycheck. I was serving when I was going to university, so I would have my paycheck that would get deposited to my bank account, every 2 weeks, and that would cover my rent and utilities and stuff. And then I would have my tips, and that is what I would use to survive, basically eat. And you know what? We had fun. We definitely went out when we wanted to go out. And there really wasn't any financial stress about it. I was paying my rent, paying whatever the phone and all that sort of stuff. And everything else went to like food and booze. So it was a great life. Was making minimum wage and nothing crazy, but we survived. Fast forward a few years, got out of university, got a real job, started making actually legit money. The bank account started to grow because, of course, we were kind of still living as though we were serving still and whatnot. I say we because I was with my husband to be at the time. But then you get a real job, you get a bigger house or bigger apartment, you get a lease on a car, and all these expenses start adding up. And soon enough, you're kind of going, okay, now instead of just having rent and some utility bills, now I've got a mortgage, and now I've got car payments and whatever memberships and all this sort of stuff, and all these commitments that we start making once we start getting a paycheck, they start putting a lot of strain on ourselves. I got to a place where we had all those financial commitments. We were getting married, we were having a baby, not necessarily all together, but very consecutively, and it was a lot. Our entire wedding, I basically put on my credit card. Just FYI. But so we came out of that kind of our first years of marriage being completely underwater financially. And essentially what we ended up having to do was sell our house. It was during a boom in Calgary, which it tends to do. So we were at the peak of it. We bought at the low point, sold at the high point, and made a great amount of money, and moved across the country to the middle of the woods and paid off all of our debts and started over. From this new mecca in the woods, I basically vowed at that point I was never going to be in that situation again where our credit cards were out of control and we just were surviving barely. So I got it in my head, and I'm a stubborn person like this, that we would just stop. All of our credit cards from that point forward, once they were fully wiped out from the sale of our house and things like that, I ensured that every month the entire credit card bill was paid in full every month. This became my new requirement for life. I still, of course, use credit cards because I wanted all those extra points and rewards. Because, why not? I use our credit card for everything we do for purchasing, but I have to ensure that it's cleared off every month, paid in full. There's no balances carried over, never any interest charges. This is my kind of MO in life. One of the biggest things I learned about myself throughout kind of all these years, and I feel like a lot of the clients that I work with operate like this too, is that we see a number in our bank account and we spend to it. So whether it's $100 in our bank account, $1,000 in our bank account, or $10,000 in our bank account, we get this in our head that we've got that as play money. Yes, we there's this subconscious thing about the bills that will come and things like that. But ultimately, if we know we're making X $1,000 a year or a month or whatever it might be, we're going to spend to that. And what I needed to learn how to do, and I want to share it with you guys, is to trick your brain ultimately into not realizing you've got the money you've got so that you can do bigger things like retirement and saving for vacations, having emergency savings and all this sort of stuff. And I use the same principle and philosophy in my business. So my biggest thing that I started doing beyond paying off my credit cards is only having money in my like main bank account for what I need. And everything else gets put into other accounts. I have read a few books that have inspired me for all of this. One was Profit First by Michalowicz, and another one, Business Made Simple. And I'm totally blanking on who wrote it, but I'll find it and I'll put it in the show notes. But both of these books, they're obviously from a business perspective, but I've used them to apply to kind of morph into my own little system and apply it to both my business and my personal life in terms of finances. So really what those books and this whole idea is all about is it's kind of like, do you remember that like envelope system that people used to say is like, okay, you take out your cash and you put like X number of dollars in this envelope and that's for groceries, and then X number of dollars in this envelope and that's going to be for your spending money and playtime. This envelope is going to be for your rent or your mortgage, and this one's for your bills, and basically using that kind of cash basis envelope system to get you through the day-to-day of running your life. It's really for someone who's very tactile, needs to like see and can't deal with that digital side of things. So it totally is a way that you can do all this. I, as you may know about me, hate paper. So the idea, well, and the risk of having cash anywhere and me having to keep track of it and all these little envelopes drives me insane. I use the same philosophy, but I do it digitally. So I have in my personal bank account, I've got probably 6 different bank accounts. In my business, I've got 4 that I use. Sometimes I might have a 5th savings account, but I don't necessarily use it. I've got all these bank accounts. One of the bank accounts, both business and personal, is like my main, I'll talk business, is my main operating account. So this is the account that all my money comes into and my bills get paid out of. I, of course, as many of us do, have like auto payments for different things. It's all set up through that main account. That's where all of my revenue gets put into. But I also have 4 other accounts. I've got one that deals with my taxes. So as an entrepreneur, I need to, and whether you are a corporation or a sole proprietor, you still need to plan for those taxes because you're not prepaying them like you would if you were an employee. So in that tax account, I will put in a percentage of my revenues for things like my corporate taxes, both federal and provincial, as well as my GST that I'm going to owe, or your sales taxes that you're going to owe. That's where I kind of squirrel that money away. My GST or sales tax, I pay quarterly. So I will pull money out of that account every time I need to pay my GST bill. And I will also continue to build that. So when my year-end taxes come due, again, I've got that money sitting there, hopefully. The second account that I use is for investments. This one is one that kind of right now is empty because I'm working towards other things. But that one is really for once all my other accounts are full and I've got extra money, I can then start using that to invest in either my business or actual investments, retirement type stuff that I can use through my business and different things like that. So more for that either passive income or for kind of growth and building the business. I have a third account I use for profit because you know what? We need a little something to make it feel like we're actually doing this for a reason. I know there's been a lot of times in the growth of my business that this account has been empty, or it's just there's been, little tiny bits in there, but I do try to put something in there to help me feel as though this is, all the hard work is worthwhile. And the last account that I have is my savings account. And this one is, I should call it emergency savings. And so in that account, what I try to do is have 3 to 9 months of operating expenses kind of saved up in there. I am not there yet, but that's just me. I keep doing other things with my money, unfortunately. But the idea is to have like 3 to 6 months of operating expenses. So whatever kind of your monthly average of what you spend to keep your business alive, to have that money set aside in that emergency savings account so that if you get into a lull with your revenue, you can still cover the overhead that you need to cover. So yeah, so that's like, those are the 4 savings accounts that I've got set up. On my personal side, just in case you're curious, I do have kind of that main operating account. And then for me, I've created savings accounts based on my different goals. I've got a savings account that is for like our mortgage, just to try and maybe like at some point double up payments or put a lump sum payment down, whatever it may be. I've got a vacation savings account because that's where our family likes to spend our time, is on family vacation. And then I have the emergency account. So for 3 to 6 months of our like monthly expenses, having that set aside. And then lastly, I also have, I call it like my random expenses account. So this is for those things that are like once a year big expenses, or like random things like crazy dentist bills, or I don't know if you pay your insurance annually or property taxes. We do it monthly, but if you do one like annual payment, then that's where you'd be able to keep that money and squirrel away a bit every month so that you can do the one lump sum payment and you have that money set aside and ready, and it's not some big financial hit in one random month of the year. So those are the accounts that I have set up. For me, it really helps me in the sense of being able to take kind of what may seem like a nice healthy bank account and take the money away. Because if I see that big balances in the account, I start feeling like we can spend like we're the Rockefellers, and we really can. So being able to pull that money out and getting it kind of out of sight, out of mind is super helpful for me to help just mentally know what we can and can't do financially. So how do I do this? Practically speaking, when I probably go in every 2 weeks or twice a month to deal with my books. So I'll reconcile things, go through the bank feeds, make sure I have documentation for all this stuff, get everything added to my QuickBooks account. Then I will go through and see what bills I owe and what bills are coming up, get payments out, and do a little bit of kind of forecasting to see, okay, what do I need in my bank account till the end of the month, sort of thing. As I mentioned, my operating account, like my day-to-day account, I have a minimum balance that I want to have in there so I can ensure that any bills that need to go through are going to go through. And then anything above that is what I start moving into the other accounts. So I will put, usually if there's say 10 grand is my minimum, then I will take anything above 10 grand and I will move those into the other accounts. I start with my tax account. My tax account is the most important account at this point for me to fund, because that's money that I've collected for the feds and eventually we'll need to give it back to them. So that one is super important. And of course, my corporate taxes or personal taxes, if you're a sole prop, those you want to plan for that so that you're not kicked in the gut with a $20,000 tax bill and you've got no money for it, because that sucks. So that tax account is my number one account to start moving money to. And I would usually, depending on how much float I've got, I would do anywhere between 50 and 70%, just depending on how much. If I've got a lot of extra, then I can start getting into more reasonable numbers. I like to make sure that that tax account is funded. Secondary to the tax account, if that is looking to be in a good position, then I will then turn to start also funding my emergency savings account. That's my backup fund if things blow up a little bit and I lose clients, or things are paused for a bit. I want to be able to, I want to ensure that I can cover my bills in case there's like a downswing in revenues or whatever it may be. As business owners, we deal with constant ebbs and flows in our revenue. So being able to plan for the downswings is really important. My second account that I will start putting money towards will be that emergency savings account. And once I'm at a place where I'm able to fund both, I'd probably do 50-50 if I can get away with it. And then once kind of that emergency savings account is, I have at least 3 months in there, then I'll start putting money into the other ones. Getting into putting money into the profit account and then lastly the investment account. So I will, and usually the profit and investment, because they're both kind of in my mind equal, I would split. So if I've got my emergency savings fully funded, and usually the tax one and tax, profit, and investment are ones that I can kind of continually put money towards, I'd probably split. I'd maybe do 50, 25, and 25 of any overflow money that I've got in my operating account. So yeah, that's how I manage my money to make sure that, I'm not just spending everything that's there. I really want to encourage you to set up those savings accounts. At very minimum, being able to have your main operating account and two savings accounts is, I think, a must have. You must have that tax savings account. You are going to need to pay taxes, whether it's just a sales tax or, if you're profitable and reporting profits, you're going to need to pay income taxes, whether it's corporate or personal. Having that money set aside is going to save you, save you a lot of headache and financial stress and strain. So that is number one must have. Everyone needs to go open that account right now. The second one that I believe is a must have is that emergency account so that you can be moving money in there and helping to build a bit of a cushion for yourself in case you have a downswing or for when you have a downswing. It just, for many businesses, it's just part of the business to have up and down cycles. So you need to build up that pot to help get you through the slow periods of the year. I do think there should be one extra one at minimum just to be keeping any overflow beyond that. Because why else are we doing this if not to have extra overflow that can eventually get back into our own pockets? So that's, I really would encourage you to do that. If you don't even trust yourself, for me, I bank with RBC. And in my RBC account, I've got all the accounts like laid out in there for me so I can see it every time I go in. If you don't trust yourself enough to be able to, see the one balance of your main account as, X dollars and not be lured by the money in the savings accounts, open up savings accounts in totally different banks. So, I have actually recently done this. EQ Bank has got awesome interest rates. So I've moved a lot of I shouldn't say our personal savings into EQ so that we can be earning higher interest rates on that money. And now when I go into our bank account, I kind of have a little bit of a shocker because all that money's gone. But it totally helps to keep me grounded in spending within our limits. And that money, it's there, it's growing, it's just a bit more out of sight, out of mind. And it really is helping me to up our savings game. So if that's something you need as well to like have a completely different banking institution holding the savings money, absolutely go for that. It's going to be a game changer for you and really help you not overspend, keep it within your limits, and hopefully get to a place where you're no longer having to panic about money and bills and what's going to happen. So there you have it. I really think having a system in place to help manage your money is a game changer in terms of your financial success. If you ever need any help or want to talk further in more details, just reach out. My details are going to be below. So just reach out and let's get you on track. I promise once you get started, it's going to be easy to keep going. All right. Have a great week.